Dana Lewis is a Russia analyst who's lived and worked extensively in Russia. Dana, thank you so much for joining us. Apart from what's happening inside Belarus, how much is this now about external actors? You've got Vladimir Putin on one side, you've got certainly Poland, Lithuania, and pretty much all of the EU on the other side, and now the UN Human Rights Council says it's going to have an emergency meeting to look at human rights violations in Belarus.
I don't think you can be unmoved by watching the scenes out of Belarus. I mean, for the fifth consecutive weekend, tens of thousands, over 100,000 in Minsk alone, they were all over the country protesting against Lukashenko, chanting, "You're a rat." I mean, that will get you jailed and beaten in Belarus. People are taking their safety in their hands, and they are not going to give in to this dictator, and they're demanding also that, as you just heard from Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, who a lot of people think won that election in August against President Lukashenko, ex-President Lukashenko, because he's not recognized, at least by the Baltics and many of the EU now. Tikhanovskaya criticizing this meeting that's taking place today in Sochi between Lukashenko and President Putin, a meeting that you're probably not going to see a lot of. I don't think they're going to do a joint news conference after, because Russia is walking that tightrope, and they don't want a scene to be snuggling up too much to Lukashenko, because they may shift gears and jump on another horse here if it looks like Lukashenko's losing control.
Okay, so if it's not external actors who are going to make the difference in how this thing is settled, if it's going to be an internal issue for Belarus itself, how much does it become about the point at which the army, the security forces, whoever the special police forces are, how much does it come to the point where they say to the president, you know what, we can't do it anymore, we can't keep beating people up for you?
That's what you have to keep watching, and I think right now it looks pretty solid. I mean, Lukashenko, carrying his AK-47 and rallying his troops has so far been able to keep a pretty good iron wall, a brutal one. I mean, kidnapping people off the street and beating and torturing. And then to answer your first question, and forgive me if I move past it initially, Europe doesn't want to be seen to be making this another Ukraine. They don't want to pull Russia in to support Lukashenko because Russia fears that NATO or the EU or Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia are getting too involved in it. So they've been holding back. And I think Russia's holding back to a certain extent as well. But Russia clearly is supporting him. By meeting with him today, they continue to support Lukashenko. But, beware of the bear hug, because, Putin may well eat Belarus at some point. They've been looking to amalgamate Belarus into Russia for a very long time.
Do you think that there's any room for even a little bit of maneuver from Lukashenko's side? When it's about 2 weeks now, I believe, that he said that, yes, it's true, we do have in my country somewhat of an authoritarian system. That sounded quite surprising that he would even admit something like that. Did that indicate to you that he might be ready to talk about a different kind of way of governing?
No. I mean, just look at what he's done to the street. I mean, he's not giving any sign of rapprochement, of trying to bring the opposition in. He's arresting them, throwing them out of the country, or charging them with plotting against the state. He's just raising the stakes day by day by day. And you know what? The street is responding. It is not folding. It is not backing down. He is reigniting these protests day by day. And I think the more people he beats in jails, and intimidates and arrests and strikes he has to try and break at some of the big factories, the more pressure he applies, the brighter the burn. And I don't know how it's going to end. I mean, I think here's the one analysis is that, yes, right now he's winning, Adnan, but over time the economy is getting worse. COVID-19 is making a comeback there. There's a lot of incentive for people to stay in the street. It's just not the elections.
Dana, listen, stay with us and let's look at what's been happening in Russia with the end of local elections, final round of voting on Sunday. The biggest pro-Putin party there claiming a major victory in those elections. It's called United Russia. It says all of its candidates for governors are well ahead and that they are on track to win majorities in all regional legislatures. The party of the poisoned opposition leader, Alexei Navalny, claiming wins in several Siberian cities. Navalny was on his way back from Siberia to Moscow when he fell ill, the victim of poisoning, according to the German government a few weeks ago. but there have been reports of numerous irregularities, according to monitors. Apart from the issue of fair and free elections in Russia, with more people, Dana, complaining about corruption, about the cost of living, about a deteriorating economy, if there were to be major changes, even in local elections, with parliamentary ones coming up next year as well, would changes to whoever is a ruling representative actually make a difference to people's daily lives?
Well, it's a test. These regional elections that took place over the weekend is a test for next year's parliamentary elections, as you duly note. I mean, don't forget last year, United Russia, Putin's party, lost control of the council in Moscow. And Alexei Navalny, who was poisoned, there's no doubt that he was poisoned with Novichok. That's now been confirmed by Sweden and also by France now. He was out working in those regions, not only to uncover corruption, but, the so-called smart voting system where you support anybody but United Russia. And the fact, yes, the Kremlin will claim that they had huge success in these regional elections, but they also lost. They didn't lose, but they lost seats in Tomsk. And also the fourth largest city in Russia, Novosibirsk. So there have been gains by those opposed to the Kremlin, and they will say, despite all of the ballot stuffing, the illegal, vote fraud that is controlled by Moscow, that in fact they were still able to get people elected in these elections, and they are making progress against the administration. And you are seeing just the fact that some of these people have been elected. It tells you a level of the unrest and dissatisfaction in Russia to do with this referendum, which took place in the summer. A lot of people think it wasn't fair. Many people didn't support it. There are people frustrated with the handling of COVID-19, and there is increasing frustration, Adnan, with the economy there as well.
Okay, I'm really glad you mentioned the fact this is pretty much breaking news, just been confirmed in the past hour and a half, that specialist labs in France and Sweden have now confirmed that Navalny was poisoned by a strain of the Novichok agent, which was confirmed by Germany. Still, Donald Trump doesn't blame Russia for it. Vladimir Putin denies it, as he always does. What are the similarities here between Lukashenko and Putin in the way they're holding on to power? Obviously, we don't see necessarily as regularly people being beaten up in the streets. We've certainly seen it in the recent past. But is there a form of manipulation, intimidation, some kind of secret police or kind of monitoring of people that is helping Putin stay in power?
I mean, they're heavily police state oligarchies, relics of the old Soviet Union. And of course, I mean, Navalny, he's an opposition figure. He was under constant surveillance by the FSB. You tell me that the State Security Service doesn't know who poisoned him? I talked to the Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Defense Department, Andy Weber, who under the Obama administration, he said, look, there's no question that this is deception by the Russians, but there's no question it came from a military lab in Russia. There is no way this stuff floats around on its own. It cannot be reproduced anywhere. It's very specific. It's very developed. It was called newbie. Essentially that's what Novichok means. There's no way that was carried out without the consent of the Kremlin, of a very high profile opposition figure. And yes, the two states are running in parallel in the way that they brutalize and suppress their opposition and hold, massive vote fraud at the ballot boxes. So far, they've been successful. But if Belarus continues to burn, Putin is absolutely shaken that will spread into Russia.
And what you say there, Dana, then therefore translates into people who are not Russian looking at the country and thinking, how can anyone support Vladimir Putin? What is it about the man, and what is it about the connection that he has with those people who genuinely support him and will go into a polling booth and actually put their tick next to his name or to United Russia that supports him?
We don't know how many ticks, do we? Because they'll say they have 80% in national elections or on the referendum. And most people think that the numbers are probably, in the 40s and 50s. A lot of older people, Adnan, who kind of had this contract with him, which was a social contract. We don't care about democracy so much because in the 90s and the collapse of the Soviet Union and under Yeltsin, it resulted in a lot of chaos. And they equate kind of law and disorder that took place after the collapse of the Soviet Union with democracy. It's very strange when you poll it inside Russia. But that social contract, which means, you keep us employed, you keep the economy running, you keep our pensions coming, that is collapsing now under COVID-19. So even the older people, the who grew up in the Soviet era, are beginning to turn against Putin. And that's why they held this referendum and they pushed it so hard during the summertime, because they were worried about what was going to happen to the street in the fall. And it's starting to happen now.
It's going to be very interesting. Dana, thank you so much. We always appreciate your participation. Dana Lewis with the analysis on Belarus.